Hello amigos! Welcome back to your performance novela, Us the Performers. Today's episode will talk about a critical topic that we will need on our new series, Perf Baby Steps, coming soon, where we'll be learning how to use the performance tools that are out there in the market. As I mentioned, before we can do baby steps, we need to learn some key concepts about how all these tools work and their primary functions. Once you understand these concepts, we will rush through all the tools available in the market so that you can learn them quickly. So, let's get moving. First, we will talk about load-test automations, their reasons, and what's the deal with them. Alright? Okay. A load-test automation, or any automation actually now that I think about it, is a program that somehow simulates or imitates the actions that a real user does in a system. On this, there are some different ways in how the automation simulates the user actions. On the first type, out of these types that we will talk about, we have automations that work at the user interface level. They use commands to control the interface or the frontend by either triggering these frontend elements or actually doing the clicks and keyboard inputs. On the other hand, we have automations that do not care of the user interface. Their all attention is on the messages sent by that interface. That focus is on forging those messages that were sent by the UI from the actions that a real user did. They work generating only these messages. No front ends, no JavaScript, CSS, web pages, or anything like that. And last, on the third type, we have the in-code automations. They live inside the application code. They help us to trigger the processes that we want to run from the inside and then measure their performance. Some of the test types that fall into this category are such as unit testing, simple function calls, or some service vectors, and many other techniques. Most of the load test automation tools will deal with that second type, the message forging type, or in other words, they are known as the protocol type. As we mentioned in previous episodes, the simulations based on message requests, the protocol ones, are way lighter and preferred to simulate several users slamming our system. If you want to find more about that, above you will see a link to the video episode where we explain that. But the biggest deal on these tools is to create a set of commands to generate or that will forge or send those requests that will make the server think that it is responding to the real deal. In other words, we will be fooling the server into thinking it's working or replying to a real user, which is supposed to be interacting with the UI. Now, how do we generate these commands that will forge and send those messages that will fool the server, you may be asking? Well, the most common practice for this is to capture or spy those messages while a real user does those actions manually in real life. Most probably that is going to be you, the scripter. You will be that user. And you may say, spying messages, executing manually? What is this nonsense? Well, for you to understand this spying thing, first, many scripting tools come with programs that will sit in between the front end and the server to capture all the messages that will pass along between those two while you use the app. There is your spy, peeping and taking note on all of the messages exchanged between those two actors. This spy program works usually by setting a proxy and sending all the communication through it, acting as an intermediary. By forcing that communication to pass through it, it will be capturing and keeping a log about each message that is passing back and forth. All the requests and responses, as I said, will be stored. And most tools will then analyze those messages and automatically create commands that will generate those messages that were captured as they were captured. Yeah, with those commands, we will forge and be sending those messages finally to fool the server. But then we will have to add some things to those commands like correlations, parameters, wait times, think time, spacing, and many other things. Some of these translating mechanisms will identify elements of the messages that need correlation, and some may even automatically generate that correlation instruction for you. But none of them are really good. You better know what it is doing. And besides, correlations are a topic on themselves, so that are better left for another episode. Why don't we get going and we'll talk about those in other episodes. Now, on the other hand, some tools do not come with that spying program or spying functionality. They depend on you doing that spying, which will be done most commonly on two possible ways. The first is to gather or spy that communication yourself. And you may be scared, but this is not a big deal. Suppose that you are dealing with a web application. In that case, most browsers have this tab of developer tools that will enable you to observe and even capture that information and then export it. Then that export will come in some universal file format that you can use elsewhere. Usually, that file format will be HAR files. Now, some load testing tools will automatically have that functionality to import those HAR files and generate the commands from them for you. But in contrast, other load generating tools will force you to manually create everything from the HAR files, as they often lack that importing functionality. But no worries, you can find multiple plugins or libraries everywhere that will help you with this HAR command translation or import. On the other hand, if you're scripting a non-browser application that doesn't have those tools, you can use many programs created to capture these messages exchanged between the application and the server. Somewhat like a network traffic capturing tool. I personally like to use Fiddler the most, but there are many more that can help you with this. Another spyless path is when you know very well how to generate those commands or forge those messages. This situation is common when you have APIs, services, and known requests. I mean, on those situations, you have usually precise information on how to generate those messages. And there, the communication usually is not that complex with just service requests, right? And there you have it, amigos. That is how generally these protocol-based tools work. Somehow, you capture the messages generated by the UI while the user is acting on it, and you do this with communication spying solutions or using your knowledge of the messages. When you have that, you work on forging those messages to completely fool the server into thinking that they are responding to the real deal, a flesh and bone user. But I want to give you a final parenthesis. Remember that I mentioned that some load tools work at the front-end level? Well, they get those actions recorded or imitated similarly. Well, now that I think about it, even general QA automation tools will work in a similar way, even if they are just working in the front-end level. Yeah, they work very similar to the protocol-based ones. This means that they will also spy, only that this spying will capture actions on the front-end objects, not the communication. Nothing in between the GUI and the server, but in between the user and the GUI. They will record those actions and focus on recreating them, this time directly in the browser or in the front-end application. It is essential for you to understand these key concepts. As I mentioned, they will be critical when we start providing the baby steps on most of the load testing tools. And with that cleared out, I think that we are ready to start slamming some of those tools, well, learning around them. But there you have it, amigos. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and learned a lot. And what do you think of these explanations I gave? Do you think I missed something to be explained around this topic? If that is the case, please leave me a comment down here in this section. And okay, it's time to leave it there, amigos. Thanks again for watching this episode, and I wish you to have a wonderful day. I will be seeing you soon. Adios.